TOTC2020, and Molly Wellman, a mixologist and bartender owner of Japs in Cincinnati, Ohio. You guys want to go on, introduce yourselves, and talk a little bit about the video we shot a few weeks ago, and then from there we'll let the video roll and see how things go.
Sounds good. Go ahead, Danny.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I am the master distiller at the Bourbon 1790 Distillery. I'm thrilled to death. I love Tales of the Cocktail. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to watch the video and learn a little bit about what we do, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end. And we're willing to talk about whatever you want to talk about our bourbon, about how it mixes in a cocktail, you know, whatever comes to mind. So thrilled to be here. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Molly before we do the video.
Hi, I'm Molly Wellman here in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm the owner of Japs, which is a fantastic cocktail bar I've had for 10 years, and do cocktails from the 1700s and 1950s. So I really love classics. I really love bourbon, and I'm a big fan of 1792. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here. I love Tales. I've been many times. And it's really cool to be here in this kind of different way. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Danny and Molly. If nothing else, we're ready to roll that video. And I put in the chat box, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we'll answer them at the end.
Cool.
right.
The questions you've been putting into the chat here. So we're going to take some time to go through these. I'm going to let Molly and Danny do most of the talking here, but Danny, this question's predominantly for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about our mash bill and what's unique about the amount of rye in 1792?
All right, I'd love to. So first of all, I'll start with the bad news. We don't talk about the specifics of our mash bill, but that being said, we are considered to be a high rye mash bill. And I think most bourbons have some amount of rye. Of course, everyone knows that it's got to be 51% or more corn. It's going to almost always have some malted barley for the enzymes that are needed to break starch down so we can ferment. But I think I'm going to answer this question in terms of what makes our bourbon unique. And in addition to the high rye mash bill, we've got a still that is unique to us. It's a pretty large still. It's a 6-foot diameter still. It's got 25 plates. It's got sieve trays and what's called a de-entrainment tray and bubble caps and demister pads. And it really gives us a lot of tools to separate what we don't want, concentrate the alcohol, of course, and concentrate what we do want. Now, one of the things that we like to concentrate and that really makes our bourbon unique is that we use a yeast that is really quite unique. It's very fruity. And that may not sound good in bourbon but when you consider how those fruity compounds that are a result of fermentation age, over time, they will oxidize. They'll turn from fresh fruits or floral notes into aged stone fruits and really interesting complex aromas. And those are some of the things that are a result of aging, but they originate from our yeast. And that is something that really makes our bourbon unique, in addition to the fact that we have a very high rye mash bill in our bourbon.
Awesome. Thanks, Danny. We appreciate that. The next question is about our marketing, and I'll talk about this a little bit, then I'll let Danny and Molly touch on it a little bit as well. But this question says that the marketing seems very male-dominated, but it seems to be versatile in cocktails. Do female drinkers enjoy 1792? So from a marketing standpoint, we've heard that loud and clear that 1792 as a brand has been a little male focused, but we've got feedback from our internal team and from our consumers and customers, and we're hearing it loud and clear. So we're going to work to be more inclusive of including more females in our advertising and our marketing, and also in the brand in general. So we're working on that, and we appreciate the feedback. In terms of female drinkers enjoying 1792, Danny, I know you've done some events with some women who whiskey clubs. Talk about that.
Well, certainly, I think people who enjoy bourbon and people who enjoy really good cocktails, yes, and that to a very large degree is our women customers as well. But specific to your point, 1792 is really getting popular on the West Coast, and I've done a few events for a club on the West Coast, both in Southern California, Los Angeles, Long Beach, as well as the Bay Area. A chapter or a club called Women Who Whiskey, and they are dynamic and they love whiskey. Specifically, they also love bourbon. They ask incredible questions. They're extremely educated on the topics of bourbon as well as cocktails, and they like to learn, and I have so much fun doing those events. We get to talk about our bourbons, we taste our bourbons, we have discussions, we ask questions, we talk back and forth. So I say, absolutely, we are fond of our customers, and this group in particular, Women Who Whiskey, is outstanding. All the chapters I've been a part of, it's just been a lot of fun, and I like to talk about bourbon, and unfortunately, you guys didn't hear some of the banter Molly and I have been going through, but we love to talk about cocktails, and this group is exciting and probably one of my top 1 or 2 favorite whiskey clubs.
Aww.
So.
Awesome. Thanks, Danny. So this next question will be a good one for Molly to answer. So everybody says that they agree on more cocktail recipes. Can you give us some more cocktail ideas that, put the bourbon or the spirit front and center? What else does Japs do behind the bar with 1792 that you can share with us?
So I love classic cocktails. And so there's so many different classics out there. I mean, we've been putting, whiskey in cocktails for, a very long time. So, from the cocktails that have been like written down and have researched, I'm still finding more all the time. There's so many different ones. So let's take the Manhattan, for instance. So there are so many different variations that kind of start all with the basic template of a Manhattan, whiskey, sweet vermouth, and bitters, right? That's a basic Manhattan. So take a Saratoga, which happens to be my favorite. That's basically a Manhattan with an addition of brandy, an American brandy. Preakness. The Preakness is another one that came out in the 1930s, basically a Manhattan. Add the addition of Benedictine, and you have a Preakness. Such a great cocktail. Another really great one from San Francisco, talk about the West Coast, which I love making this drink. And, I have a lot of different, female and male customers who love this drink. It's basically a Manhattan with the addition of champagne. It's a really great cocktail. It's called the Boothby cocktail, and it comes from the Palace Hotel in San Francisco. Such a great drink. So these are some really whiskey forward cocktails that are so easy to make and easy to remember and easy to find the ingredients as well. So there you go. It's an
And if I can add to that, Molly, one thing that I like to talk about, I love bourbon and I like drinking it in many ways. I saw something come across, I'll drink it neat. I do like it on a nice, clean, big ice cube, but I love cocktails and I love what you do. And I will say that in my opinion, high rye mash bill bourbons actually are better for cocktails than not high rye. I find that rye mixes well with the sweetness, a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of bitters, a little bit of the citrus, and they just blend so well together. So I'm a fan of high rye bourbon in cocktails because I like spirit forward drinks, and I just think they're the best blend. So
I think that's kind of what happens. Uh-oh. I think we were having a little technical difficulties there. I completely didn't hear anything you said.
No.
But I think you were talking about fruitiness of cocktails. Is that correct?
Well, no, sorry. Can you hear me now, first of all?
Uh-oh, everybody's frozen. Oh, no.
Try hitting refresh.
Everybody's frozen. I'm so sorry. Shoot.
Now, can you hear me now? Right.
Wait a minute. Oh, you can hear me? I don't
have my back. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. There you are.
I think what I was saying was important for a cocktail crowd. So
Yeah.
my point was that our bourbon, high rye bourbons, I think make the best cocktails.
Agreed.
Because
Agreed.
spiciness with an old fashioned, for example, it works well with a little bit of bitter, a little bit of sweetness,
Yeah.
a little bit of citrus, and it just makes a better balanced cocktail. So I'm a huge fan of rye bourbon in cocktails.
I like rye bourbon. I think that it's great with 1792 with the higher rye content. It has enough complexity that it can play with so many different flavors in so many different cocktails, especially the old fashioned. And we were just talking about, making old, the way I make old fashioned. You said you had a bunch of different ones that you like to try, which I think is great. I love using the foolproof and the bottled in bond as well for making my old fashioned. So yeah, I think I've showed you before you've come to Japs, and just the orange peel and a sugar cube and bitters, and then that's just enough sweetness. The orange peel brings out kind of like the fruitiness of the whiskey naturally, and it's just enough. It's just enough. So it's perfect. I agree. I wish I had one now.
Yeah, you're making us all very thirsty at this early in the day. we got a few minutes here, so I'm going to give Danny another question. So Danny, what are all your jobs as master distiller? What work is done on the liquid as it's aging, and what happens after the whiskey is aged from a blending perspective.
All right. So this type of event is not my forte, and I often get way too detailed. So, gosh, that could be answered. We could talk about that for hours. But the bottom line is my roles and responsibilities are to run the distillery. And specifically, that means when the grain comes in, my department are the ones that evaluate the quality and approve the grain. So once we get the grain, we grind it to break it down into a very fine powder. We cook it, which means we add water, and enzymes present will convert starch into sugar. And then we put it into a fermenter and we ferment it. That's where the yeast will convert the sugar, the starch that we converted to sugar. Now the sugar goes to alcohol, like your friend. And then after that, we distill it. And once we distill it, we then send it to the barrel warehouse and we put it into a barrel. Now, that's a very broad brushstroke, but there are quality checks every step of the way. Every one of those steps that I talked about impact flavor. And if we see something a little bit different, it may be my team's job to find out why it's different. How do we make the best possible distillate that will be the best possible bourbon possible? So we do a lot of experiments. We'll play around with process conditions. We'll play around with different ingredients to create new flavors. We like to experiment because it's fun and because it's a great way to learn about the process and teach others about the process. And it might be, the way we figure out the next best thing. So a lot of science. I like to say my job is a mix between art and science, and a lot of people interactions. We're developing teams to make bourbon, but it's both art and science. And I like to say that I'm an artistic scientist. Somebody asked me once, am I a scientific artist or an artistic scientist? And I say I'm an artistic scientist because it just seems to fit. Long topic, but that's kind of a broad brushstroke of what I do in the distillery every day. And I can walk through the fermenting cellars and I can tell if things are off. That's where we create aromas and flavors. And if something doesn't smell quite right by extremely small measures, we will then look at the data and try to understand why. So again, data and sensory, and we're always trying to figure out the two and do the best we can. It's a fun process. It's not easy, but it's a fun process.
Thanks, Danny. Looks like we are about out of time here. There was one more question about the availability of 1792 and about our bar leader you all talked a little bit about in the video. So I'll take that. I will say that we're incredibly thankful that 1792 has had so much success in the market over the last year. The brand grew tremendously last year, and that's a lot of thanks to the trade. So we appreciate all your all's work and appreciation for the brand. With that being said, yes, we will have more volume coming online in the coming years and the next year, and you will be able to get more volume in the liter once the bottle comes out. So I don't have a picture of it I can show you yet, but I can say that over the next 4 to 6 weeks, we will be working to produce that and getting it out into a few markets. And then next year, it should be expanding. So we're very excited about that, and appreciate all the feedback we got from the bartender community to make that bottle come to life. So we're excited, ready to get that out into your all's hands and see what all the fun things you're going to do with our new bottle are. So Danny and Molly, anything else before we wrap up? It looks like we're running a few minutes over, but I'll give you all any parting words for our guest here.
Well, thank you for having us, and hope everyone's doing well in these challenging times. And we got a great tour. So if you are ever in town, and we're doing a lot of social distancing and safe practices right now, but if you're ever in Bardstown, please come visit the distillery. It's genuine, it's gritty, it's not fancy, but it's a wonderful place to be. So I'd love to see you here.
And I would just like to thank everyone at 1792. It's such great times working with you. I'm a big fan and love making cocktails with 1792. I always have it on my bar. So thank you. And thank you for Tales of the Cocktail for having me be a part of this as well. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Danny and Molly, and thanks everybody again at Tales. We're very excited to be a part of this year and in a unique and interesting way. And hopefully next year we can be back and live and in person and come down to New Orleans and visit. But until then, we appreciate everything you're doing for us. So with that, we'll wrap it up.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody.
I do. Did I just hang up? Thank you. See ya.